I'm in Siberia, the coldest inhabited place on Earth. As global temperatures rise, this enormous icy land is melting. The entire region is built on top of permafrost, which is now thawing at an alarming rate. The ground is collapsing, traditional ways of life are threatened, and large amounts of previously trapped methane gas are seeping into the atmosphere. Siberia's big thaw could have a catastrophic effect on the entire planet.
This is red-eye flight number 303, heading to the city of Yakutsk in Siberia.
We're on our way to one of the most northerly cities in Russia. Just 280 miles from the Arctic Circle, 6 time zones from Moscow. I'm joined by Aliona Pimenova, who'll be my translator and guide as I travel to some of the coldest places on Earth. It's my first time in Siberia. It's an enormous region that covers 77% of Russia.
To put it in perspective, it takes up about 10% of the land mass on Earth. It is massive, and a good portion of that is permafrost. That land that is frozen all the time except for that top layer that freezes in the winter, thaws in the summer.
70% of Russia lies on permafrost. It's a permanently frozen layer below the Earth's surface, made up of layer after layer of soil, sediment, rock, and ice, built up over thousands of years. So, how deep does it go? Yakutsk has what I need to find out.
The deepest hole in permafrost anywhere. And it just so happens they're doing maintenance on it today.
They're going to work right now. They're trying to get rid of the ice.
It's called the Shurgin Shaft. Started in 1827 and now 380 feet deep, built to explore how far down the frozen ground goes.
It's really amazing how deep this shaft really is. There's a chart here on the wall. The worker that's down there right now is about here. It goes a long way down.
Information acquired here shows that the permafrost in Siberia is some of the thickest in the world, 1.5 miles deep in some places. The entire city of Yakutsk is built on it, which has led to some peculiar adaptations.
One thing about building a city on permafrost is the top layer, well, it's not so permanent. So a lot of the buildings here in Yakutsk are actually up on these concrete stilts. It's the only way to keep the foundations from warping when it melts and refreezes. Installing and repairing pipes in frozen ground, extremely difficult. So what they've done is put them above ground and insulated the hell out of them.
Infrastructure and houses are vulnerable to the shifting ground.
Some of the buildings here in Yakutsk are actually twisting and sinking into the permafrost. This is known as subsidence.
The top layer refreezes each winter, but to varying thicknesses as Siberia gets warmer. Today, it's -1 degree Celsius, which is far from normal.
The average winter temperature here in Yakutsk is actually -34 degrees. It is nowhere near that today. The skaters are enjoying this warm spell.
Siberia is one of the fastest warming places on the planet, and that has potentially serious consequences for the permafrost below.
What most people don't realize is that trapped under the permafrost here is a ticking time bomb for climate change.
I've come to the underground laboratory here at the Permafrost Institute to learn more.
The coolest part of the Permafrost Institute, literally and figuratively, is the tunnel they've built underneath the building, 12 meters down. Here they can actually study the permafrost in situ.
Leading expert Dr. Alexander Fedorov has observed some big changes.
Вот это большая проблема.
This is the main problem that they are studying, the permafrost melting.
Right.
Изменение температуры мерзлых пород идут. Глубина протаивания увеличивается, и криогенные процессы сильно активизируется.
Melting permafrost is releasing huge amounts of methane gas, causing global concern. Researchers have found lakes literally bubbling with methane. Permafrost acts like a lid, locking carbon gases like methane in the ground. All that gas was formed from long-buried organic matter, dead animals, and plant life that have been on ice for thousands of years. Now, increased heat is penetrating deeper into the permafrost, thawing it, and releasing these dangerous greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. This could have a bigger impact on global warming than the burning of fossil fuels.
Усиление вот этого глобального потепления, она может произойти очень быстро.
Our carbon emissions cause the permafrost to melt, releasing methane gas, which causes the climate to warm, which causes the permafrost to melt even more, runaway greenhouse effect that could put us in the position where it becomes irreversible.
Every year, Dr. Fedorov and his team drill deep into the ground to analyze changes in the permafrost.
How far down do you drill?
5 meters, 6 meters.
That's some tough stuff.
Dr. Fedorov probes the permafrost in many locations. And what he's seeing in northern Yakutia is alarming.
We have surface subsidence more than 2 meters.
Surface subsidence of 2 meters.
Subside.
As the icy permafrost melts, the ground sinks. The formation of thaw ponds and lakes is rapidly increasing all over northeastern Siberia.
You're seeing dramatic changes.
Yes.
Scientists predict that the area of permafrost in the northern hemisphere will decline by 20 to 35% by the middle of this century, releasing a monumental amount of greenhouse gas. But as the ground melts, it's also unearthing some fascinating finds.
It looks like roadkill from last week, but it's 12,000 years old.
While the melting permafrost is a major concern, there is one positive side effect. The thawing has led to some incredible discoveries.
It's not just methane gas that's released by the melting permafrost. Sometimes things like woolly mammoths are found here, and Yakutia is the place in the world to find these frozen prehistoric creatures. There's a researcher here who's going to show me exactly what that's all about.
The Mammoth Museum houses the most diverse collection of ancient animals in the world, some of which were recently exposed in the thawing ground.
Do you think that as our climate gets warmer, it'll be easier to find more of these mammoths?
Да, возможно, есть какая-то связь. Да? Сейчас вот у нас на севере Якутии есть, образовалась огромная дыра в земле, котловина, где вот нашли вот этого бизончика, который там лежит, и тушу лошади.
Today, Professor Grigoriev is taking me behind the scenes to show me some of his most impressive discoveries.
Most important place in museum.
Yes. Wow.
Mammoth tusks.
Yes.
Very good preserved. Tusks of Malalechovsky mammoth. With blood, with muscles. And one of the first domesticated dog on the road.
first domesticated dog?
Geological age, 12,500.
12,500 years old.
The pressure of layer upon layer of built-up ice flattened this dog.
It looks like roadkill from last week, but it's 12,000 years old. You can see the teeth and the hair, everything here. It's amazing.
You can find similar find only in Yakutia.
Without a question, this is the strangest walk-in freezer that I've ever been in.
The discovery of prehistoric animals demonstrates that the land is thawing, but how much of it is melting is so far unknown.
So I've met with the scientists, but what I want to do next is meet with the people who live off the land.
I want to see how the melting permafrost is affecting them. I'm hitting the road and heading far north to some of the most isolated communities in Russia. I'll be camping with reindeer herders along the way to my ultimate destination, Omyakon, the coldest town on Earth.
Eliona!
Oh.
Aliona and our driver Artum will be making the journey with me. It's going to take 4 days of driving in treacherous conditions. First, we need to get across the Lena River, which for now is frozen solid.
At least that's what I like to believe. Today is about an 8 to 10 hour drive getting from Yakutsk up to Kandiga, and that's where we're going to be spending the night. And back onto solid ground.
We're now on the Kolyma Highway, otherwise known as the Road of Bones.
It looks like any other road, but very few roads have the history that this one does.
It was built during the Stalinist era by the prisoners of the infamous Gulag labor camps. The skeletons of the forced laborers who died during its construction were just buried into the road itself. The road is notoriously treacherous. It was laid on permafrost, so it's twisted and uneven. In places, it's very narrow and covered in a layer of thick snow.
A common practice during the coldest part of the year is to never travel alone. If you break down and you've got no help, bad things happen very quickly when it's minus 50.
It doesn't take long before we spot trouble up ahead.
This truck lost its load of pipes and went right off the road. I've heard so many stories about this road, how dangerous it is. Usually the weather conditions are bad. This road lives up to its name.
An hour and a half later, there's another accident.
So the emergency services guys are down there right now. Oh, wow. It's been just one obstacle after another all day long, and we still have a long way to go.
We press on, but getting to Omyakon is not going to be easy. After sneaking in a few hours of sleep in Kandiga, we're back on the road early the next day.
So the plan today is to go a little further north up to one of the Gulag areas. Heaven forbid, if you were a criminal or a political prisoner, this is where you would have been sent. It's quite a bit further north. It's going to take quite a few hours to get up there on a really bad road. And the camp is away from the roads. It's not going to be easy to find. There's a lot of barbed wire here. Another building down there. The gulags were a vast system of prisons that spanned the entire Soviet Union. And between the 1930s and early 1950s, between 15 and 20 million people working hard labor, long hours, in all conditions, all seasons. Horrible. Work people to death.
To honor the prisoners, locals have built a museum in their memory. Many were convicted of the most minor offenses, like Anna Aminalova.
Она в 43-м году, 14-летняя девочка, ее отправили по этапу Магадана. Осудили на 10 лет за то, что она, воровала килограмм картошки.
She survived, and her story can be told. But many did not make it out.
These gates are not particularly high, not particularly strong, but then again, they didn't need to be. In this terrain, in Siberia, if you escape, you faced almost certain death in the wilderness.
We're back on the Road of Bones, and our plan is to reach the reindeer herders of Uchige first thing tomorrow. It's slow going, and we're down to one lane when we hit another roadblock.
This is actually a pretty serious situation right now. We have several vehicles stuck on this road, and no one can move in either direction. Not good. Thankfully, it's not minus 50.
Everyone pulls together. The road is cleared, and we can keep moving.
We are free and clear for now. Fingers crossed. Time to switch up the mode of transportation.
I'm joining the local reindeer herders for a journey into the wilderness. Their 1,400-year-old way of life is being threatened by the changing climate, and I want to understand more.
Off to the next leg of my adventure. On a reindeer sled in Siberia. Woo! It's like dog sledding with less barking.
Reindeer herders rely on the income from selling reindeer meat, a staple in this part of the world. They're constantly moving and must trek every few weeks across this vast wilderness to find new pastures for their reindeer to graze.
Whoa! Whoa! Ow. Oh! We just had some kind of harness failure. Ouch.
After 3 hours of sledding, we've hit base camp.
It's home for tonight.
The temperature is -20, which is actually warm for this time of year, a trend the local herders have noticed.
В этом году в ноябре-декабре тепло было, потом резко в какой-то период заморозки стали, потом опять потеплело потихоньку.
Every aspect of their life revolves around the weather, and they have to be able to work with it, work around it, and still be able to prosper and survive.
But now, the warming climate and melting permafrost is slowly killing off the reindeer. Mikhail Pogodayev has lived with the reindeer his entire life. He now advocates for their survival.
When the climate is changing and you see that there are changes on the snow conditions, the reindeer will starve if the pastures will be packed with the ice.
As warm spells increase, the snow melts, leaving a layer of water. But in a snap freeze, an ice crust forms that the reindeer can't penetrate to find food. 12,000 reindeer died of starvation last year. For the herders, climate change is very real. I'm camping out with the herders for the night. They're preparing a hearty meal, stew, hot tea, and vodka.
The tradition they have here is to make a little sacrifice before every meal. Usually a bit of food, or maybe a splash of vodka, goes into the fire for good luck and health.
It's time for bed. The sun is going down, and so are the temperatures. It's -40 degrees, and it's shaping up to be one of the coldest sleeps of my life. Tomorrow, the pole of cold is in our sights, and even this place isn't immune to climate change.
The fire died about halfway through the night. Whew. Inside the tent, that's what happened to my water. It was kind of cold.
It's time for me to leave the reindeer and carry on my journey north. We head out. We make sure to load up at the last gas station before Oymyakon. After a day's driving, we make it to our final destination, the coldest town on Earth. It's a bumpy arrival.
I guess this is the kind of roads you get when you build your town on permafrost. The road just twists and buckles.
In the 1920s and 30s, it was a seasonal stop for reindeer herders. Now, it's a permanent settlement of just 500 people.
I finally made it to Oymyakon, the pole of cold. And on February 6, 1933, they recorded a temperature of -71.2 Celsius, extremely cold. Nowhere in the Northern Hemisphere has a temperature that low ever been recorded.
It may be cold out, but our reception is warm. The locals are performing a traditional welcoming ceremony for us.
So what is it about this place in particular that makes it so cold? The main reason is that Oymyakon sits in a valley. The cold air is trapped by these mountains, and it just sits there and pools. Beautiful blue sky, but bone-chillingly cold.
But not as cold as expected. Today it's minus 31. Aliona and I are at the local weather station where we meet meteorologist Mika Bakarova. They've been recording temperatures for the last 50 years here and have observed some big changes.
Вторая декада марта официальная на 4 градуса температура была выше средних многолетних норм.
Local fishermen have noticed the shift as well.
А раньше здесь лед такая толстая была, да? Сейчас уже такая становится, такая потоньше.
Arctic temperatures are expected to increase between 1.5 to 2.5 degrees by 2040, meaning the permafrost will continue to thaw at a dangerous rate.
We're afraid that we're going to reach a tipping point where our carbon emissions cause the permafrost to melt, releasing methane gas, which causes the climate to warm, which causes the permafrost to melt even more. And you can see where this is headed.
There's no doubt the temperature here is warming, but if global greenhouse emissions can be reduced, it may not be too late to halt this rise and keep the permafrost frozen. Laos is a place of great beauty with a brutal past. The people here have fought for survival and used their land for protection. The vast caves provided shelter from a bombing campaign which decimated the country. But now there's a new enemy: rapid deforestation. More and more farmers are clearing the land, and big industry is destroying forests at an alarming rate. As climate change continues, this degradation has a global impact. Laos is at the tipping point of change, but can this developing country balance the needs of the people with the needs of the planet? I'm in Southeast Asia, in the small landlocked country of Laos. I've landed in the capital of Vientiane. Laos is one of the last remaining communist countries in the world. Here, the pace of life is slower. The people are poor, but rich in tradition and history.
Every morning, the local monks walk down the street to the temple, and people give them food, and that's their sustenance for the day.
Its geography is breathtaking. Limestone formations, called karsts, are surrounded by lush forest and a land rich in resources like timber and minerals. But increasingly, this small country is under big pressure. Its climate is changing. The dry seasons are getting longer, and its disappearing forest is causing global concern. I'm on a journey to find the source of these problems. I'm starting in central Laos, in the Shanghai province, to learn about an old and controversial farming practice.
The smell of smoke is thick in the air. It looks like it's foggy, but it's actually smoke up in the mountains.
The ground is on fire as farmers burn their land, clearing it to plant new crops. It's called slash and burn and happens for 4 months every year during the dry season.
On the hillside behind me is a really good example of a typical slash and burn for here in Laos. What the farmer has done is cut down the old vegetation, let it sit and dry out for a while, and then set it on fire to get it ready for the next crop.
Farmers are poor, and the terrain is steep and difficult. Slash and burn is the most practical technique they have to fertilize the soil and grow their crops.
Wow. Got a significant burn operation going on here.
It's an agricultural practice dating back thousands of years. It's not pretty, but it is effective. During the burn, carbon enters the atmosphere as CO2. But after, a mineral-rich residue of potassium, phosphorus, silica, and other minerals are left, providing nutrients for the rice crop. Dr. Terry Bolger is a scientific advisor to the Lao government. He's been studying the practice firsthand. He tells me what happens next.
Then you have the ash on the ground, and you've opened up the ground surface. So in a few weeks' time, when the rain comes, then they'll plant into this with their crop, most likely upland rice.
Very low tech.
Yep. The farmer will just go around with what they call a dibbling stick. So it's just a stick that's maybe a bit pointed on the end, and they'll poke holes at about 25 centimeter intervals, and then in each hole they just drop a few rice seeds.
In the next stage, the monsoon rains will fall and help all those nutrients sink into the soil. Farmers rely on the rains to nourish crops, but the dry seasons are lasting longer, so the harvest could be drastically reduced, and that affects entire villages.
These bigger burns, it's actually going to be the fields of multiple families from one village.
And how much space would they clear typically?
Let's say they might only burn 1/10 of their farming land each year and then rotate around. Now, when population density or pressure on the land starts to get higher, then the system ecologically doesn't work so well anymore.
As more poor Laotians turn to agriculture for survival, the amount of available farmland gets smaller. For the farmers who can't afford sophisticated farm equipment and fertilizers, the merits of this technique are obvious.
Slash and burn agriculture is normal for this part of the world, and no single farmer is going to put that much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. However, no raindrop believes that it's responsible for the flood, so if you add up a lot of these together, thousands upon thousands, the impact does become significant.
But this is not just a farming practice confined to Laos. Worldwide, an estimated 250 to 300 million farmers use slash and burn. It's illegal in Laos because the government worries that too much of the land is being degraded.
You get more erosion, you get more problems with weeds, and you get declines in soil fertility. So those are the main three things that end up making the system sustainable.
As we travel throughout the region, fires are everywhere. The air quality is poor, and some fires are out of control.
Oh, wow. Looks like this slash and burn got a little bit more burn than they were expecting. Coming up the hill, the one thing you don't want to be is uphill of a fire. The wind has really picked up, so that's going to fan the flames.
This fire is getting too close to the nearby village.
A little close for comfort right now.
And there are very few resources to fight the blaze.
Right now, all these little kids are scrambling down the hill with this fire hose because they're fast and they can get through the bush really, really quickly and get that hose to the fire. That sound.
The winds shift, and eventually the fire burns out. The fires set by farmers can destroy swaths of forest, but are by no means the biggest threat to the land here.
You know, now there's other projects like mining projects or hydropower projects or large plantation tree projects that are all competing for the traditional lands that were used by the local villagers for slash and burn.
All of these factors have contributed to the forest cover in Laos declining from 70% to 41% of the land in 40 years. One of the worst culprits is logging, much of it illegal. The demand for wood in neighboring Vietnam and China has contributed to a logging boom. Many old forests have also been cleared for large and profitable rubber tree plantations. The government has now restricted how much land gets cleared, but observers say the rules are not strict enough and are being ignored. It's a problem all over Southeast Asia, which has the fastest rate of forest decline in the world. As trees are cut down, 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year get released into the atmosphere due to deforestation. Forest carbon is released when trees burn or when they decay after dying. But trees are also necessary for our planet's survival. Through photosynthesis, trees absorb harmful carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They then use sunlight to turn the CO2 into oxygen, which is put back into the air, helping animals and plants breathe. And now, the devastating effects of deforestation are having a massive impact on the wildlife of Laos. Not long ago, the forests of Laos were home to large populations of both wild and domesticated elephants. But today, they're on the brink of extinction. Wide-scale logging in Southeast Asia is a serious threat to the global ecosystem. I've come to an elephant conservation center in a remote part of northern Laos to see the impact deforestation has had on the elephant population.
It's early morning. The elephants have been left out in the forest overnight so they can rest up and graze. And now, the mahouts are going to go and find them and bring them back to the conservation center.
Once, Laos was called the land of 1 million elephants. But a dramatic loss of almost 85% of their traditional habitat means that the population in Laos has declined from 2,000 or 3,000 in the late 80s to around 800.
They really are majestic animals in every sense of that word. They move with such purpose, almost in slow motion, and they have just so much mass, but yet at the same time, so much grace.
Elephants are paying a steep price for illegal logging in this country. Dr. Annabelle Perez is a biologist here, and she helps rehabilitate elephants.
Half of the population, or more than half of the population, is still working logging in Laos.
Most of the elephants here have been rescued from the logging industry. Their riders, called mahouts, rely on the income to survive. They work the elephants to the point of exhaustion and injury. Some are even drugged so that they'll work faster. These conditions have resulted in the elephants not breeding. Their numbers have plummeted.
For years and years, we treat them like they are slaves, you know? So, and I think now is the point to change this. It's time now to admire them again and respect them.
The center is encouraging mahouts to give up logging and use their elephants differently. They're part of an eco-tourism retraining program where they're learning new ways of handling the elephants.
Not all the mahouts are bad mahouts, you know? Right. They understand why it's better to give food instead to hit them.
Touch, voice signals, and food prompts are used while working with the elephants. They want to preserve the tradition of mahouts, but put it to good use in a modernizing world.
Okay.
There we go.
Here we go.
Okay, now you say side.
Side.
All right.
Side.
Okay.
Side.
And then shake your leg now. Use your voice.
Trying to remember all the commands.
Side. Quiet. Quiet.
The center also runs a full veterinary practice and a special nursery for newborn elephants.
It's pretty amazing watching Mama and the baby. So cute.
Set in 250 acres, it's a safe haven away from logging, where the babies and mothers can thrive.
This area is specifically for the elephants to interact and socialize on their own, without the mahouts, without people around, just doing their thing. Do you think the future is bright for the elephants of Laos?
It depends. They can, now is the point, like, or we can make the difference and go here, or we can keep destroying the forest and go down.
Elephants are not the only ones who've struggled for survival. Not long ago, Laotians themselves had to reshape the environment to save their lives. Laos's relationship with its environment has always been one of adaptation. Working with nature to survive in difficult circumstances is nothing new for Laotians.
It's impossible to come to Laos and not talk about UXO, which stands for unexploded ordnance. Bombs. Lots of bombs.
Just 40 years ago, millions of bombs were raining down on Laos during the U.S. secret war here. You can see remnants of them everywhere.
During the Vietnam War period, the Americans dropped more bombs per capita here in Laos than any other country has been bombed in the world.
To survive, the villagers and opposition communists sought refuge in the vast caves in the hills. Terry and I are going into the Vienne Sai caves.
That is one serious door.
This cave was a hospital.
Look at a stack of hospital beds.
Yeah. Incubator.
It was built in the late 1960s at the height of the bombing.
This part of this cave was mainly used as an operating room for treating people and a maternity ward. What an interesting place to have a baby. Yikes. Being bombed in a cave.
There were more than 400 caves in this area. Elaborate warrens of tunnels connected eating and sleeping quarters, schools, workplaces, military barracks, and government offices.
Up to 20,000 people were living in these caves. They could hide in here for years. It just goes on, doesn't it? They knew that they were in for the long haul. They've reinforced the ceilings, expanded some of the passageways.
Oh, wow, this must be the theater.
They survived 9 years of constant bombing. It's estimated that 20,000 lives were saved by these caves, and that they helped secure victory. The U.S. stopped its bombing campaign in 1973. Today, Laos's caves are helping the world understand a major threat to the planet: climate change. Scientists have figured out how to read the messages that these caves are offering up. Terry and I head to the next cave.
Now there's a lot of limestone here in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, this area in central Laos that carries into central Vietnam a little bit is one of the largest blocks of limestone in Southeast Asia.
Laos also has a vast system of rivers. All that water pounding on limestone for millions of years has carved out underground waterways that contain some scientific treasures. We're heading to the Konglor Cave to do some exploring.
One thing I've learned about the caves here in Laos is that they're big, really big. You could practically fly an airplane through them.
Terry is conducting some important climate research, and these caves are a crucial part of that work.
What we have in this part of the world is what's called a monsoonal type climate with a distinct wet season and dry season. In terms of understanding climate change, we want to look back, say, thousands, maybe 20,000 years ago to understand what the changes of the monsoon have been through that time period.
Knowing how seasons fluctuated in the past can help Laotians understand how long they should expect wet and dry periods to last in the future. Terry and other scientists do this climate research by looking at cave mineral samples found deep inside. We're traveling through the mountain via an underground river that's 4 miles long.
So what's the name of this river?
Hin Bun, Limestone River.
That's appropriate, considering we're under millions of tons of it right now.
It's pitch black in here. Our flashlights have to work hard in this massive space.
Basically going upstream right now.
We're looking for stalagmites of just the right age to help with Terry's research. Millions of years worth of water dripping from above during wet periods and then evaporating when it's dry have left behind telltale marks on these structures that are a virtual record of Laos's climate through the ages.
Real shallow spot. And there's a waterfall here.
We hit rapids. These caves are dangerous and unpredictable. This scientific expedition is becoming a white-knuckle adventure. We're navigating some unexpected rapids deep inside the belly of a mountain. But it isn't long before we're through.
Little elbow grease gets you through anything.
We continue through the darkness. We're looking for the best stalagmite for Terry's research.
Let's go have a look.
We need to find a stalagmite that Terry can tag and monitor over the next few months. He wants to find an active one and then see how much water drips on it in the upcoming wet season.
Well, it's beautiful on this side, Terry.
All right, get an estimate of how tall this column of formations is.
So let's see, to that flowstone over there.
In the future, the
4.2
chosen
meters.
stalagmite will be removed and put under the microscope for deeper analysis. Scientists can read its cross-section like a history book.
Get a distance to the wall.
Stalagmites are particularly useful for climate research because they contain several different climate records, such as oxygen and carbon isotopes.
Okay. Looks like there might be some standalone stalagmites over this way.
Watch your step. Look at this big mama.
Too big for what we want today.
What about Junior here? A little more manageable size?
I think this would work for us. You know, probably we're looking at somewhere in the tens of thousands of years here. So what I'd like to do is put a piece of flagging tape at the point where the drips would hit. And then we can capture some of the new calcite formation on the top of the piece of flagging tape. So if we come back in, say, 3 or 6 months' time, that'll help us to decide whether this is the one that we want to take to do the detailed work on back in the laboratory.
So we have this great opportunity to try and see what the climate has been like in terms of dry and wet for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years in the past.
That's right.
Very cool.
With our sample found and tagged, it's time to navigate our way out. The work done here will help our global understanding of how climate has been changing over time. Southeast Asia is currently going through unpredictable dry and wet seasons. Information about how those cycles behaved in the past will make the changing of the seasons much more predictable. The limestone karsts and caves of Laos have remained relatively untouched for centuries. For that reason, scientists are only now discovering that on top of these towering limestone formations are pristine ecosystems, little gems of biodiversity. But now, the karsts and the unspoiled world they support are under grave threat.
There's a spot where there's a scar on the side of the limestone, and that's where the local cement company has come here and is actually excavating and mining that limestone to use in their cement production. So at some point, this will end up being completely gone.
Limestone is the key ingredient in cement.
What a lot of people don't realize is that the production of cement is so widespread. It's the #2 resource used in the world just behind water, and it's actually a tremendous source of greenhouse gases. It takes, I've heard, between 7 and 8 tons of carbon dioxide gets pumped into the atmosphere for every ton of cement that is constructed.
Right now, there are 12 cement factories in Laos, but the country wants to increase production to meet the demands of change. In order to modernize, Laos plans to improve infrastructure, such as roads, dams, and housing. Depending on how those plans are carried out, those changes can either be devastating to the environment or have virtually no impact at all. The government will need to take a more active role in the protection and management of its farmland and forests, and resolve to harvest natural resources in a sustainable manner. If they do that, they stand a good chance of being one of the few nations to find a way of modernizing while reducing poverty and fighting climate change at the same time. Laos is well positioned to hit that very rare environmental home run. As global temperatures rise, the polar ice caps are disappearing at an alarming rate. As a result, more and more icebergs are showing up in the warmer waters of Canada. Tracking the growing number of icebergs is crucial, because understanding how they move and how they disintegrate is the key to understanding the melting of Arctic ice. I'll see how it's done. From above,
the waves just shooting high up into the air up against the bergs.
From below, and from the very top, an iceberg on the moon.
I'm gonna place the beacon.
Melting ice is Earth's warning signal, and icebergs are sounding an alarm bell about our climate's future. Canada on the Atlantic coast, the iceberg capital of the world. Every spring, thousands of icebergs travel from the Arctic down the 1,600-mile stretch of ocean called Iceberg Alley. 1% make it as far south as St. John's.
These icebergs are really amazing. Most of them are formed off of the glaciers on western Greenland. They're born when the glaciers calve into the Davis Strait, and a lot of them end up floating south.
It's a 3-year journey from the Arctic. Circling counterclockwise around Baffin Bay, the icebergs flow into the Labrador Current, which propels them past Newfoundland and Labrador all the way down to the southern tip of the province. They arrive here every year, but their increase in numbers is an ominous indicator of what's happening to the Greenland ice sheet. It's the second largest ice sheet in the world, and it's melting fast, shrinking 47 cubic miles a year. David Barber has been studying the Arctic for 30 years.
Well, there's lots and lots of evidence all pointing in exactly the same direction, that climate change is very much alive and well in the Arctic, and it's really affecting the marine cryosphere in general.
From snow cover to ice sheets, the cryosphere is the term scientists use for frozen water on the surface of the Earth. And right now, it's in a precarious state. The melting is leading to a rise in ocean levels worldwide, a big threat to coastal communities. Warming waters are also affecting global weather patterns. And that's not all.
The melting of the Greenland ice sheet is accelerating the production of icebergs. They're massive, they're very dense, and if you're in a ship that hits one of those, it's going to cause a tremendous amount of damage.
Nowhere else in the world do icebergs intersect with major shipping lanes and fishing zones. Collisions can be deadly. It's up to the International Ice Patrol and U.S. Coast Guard to make sure that doesn't happen.
And last year was a really crazy year, apparently.
Yes, last year was the 6th most severe we've had on record since 1900. We had over 1,500 icebergs drift south.
Today, I get to see their high-tech iceberg monitoring gear in action. This year, almost 900 bergs have been spotted, and we're only halfway through the season.
On the plane here today, we've got the pilot, we've got the co-pilot, we've got someone operating the radar, and 2 guys, and all their job is to spot icebergs. Icebergs are an extreme hazard. Obviously, just over 100 years ago, the Titanic, probably the most famous shipwreck of all when it comes to iceberg collisions, went down not too far from here.
There have been several instances over the last couple of years where ships have deflected off of an iceberg. None of them were damaged so badly that they sank.
There have been just over 50 collisions since 1980, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. Tracking buoys with sensors are deployed from the back of the plane. They're designed to read the currents, which help determine where the icebergs are going and how fast.
I see them crashing and the waves just shooting high up into the air up against the bergs. From up here, looking down, it's really hard to tell just how big these icebergs are.
Icebergs can vary in size from that of a small car to ones the size of Manhattan. The Ice Patrol is collecting some of the most detailed information for this area. It's entered into a database and shared internationally with climate scientists studying what happens to icebergs in warmer water.
Of course, the Arctic and Antarctic regions are the places on the planet that are most affected by climate change right now. Global temperatures there in the polar regions are about double what they have been. And as temperatures rise, the speed of the glacier will actually increase. And of course, the faster that glacier is moving, the more of that ice is going to end up in the water each year.
Melting Arctic ice disintegrates spectacularly into icebergs. The Petermann Glacier in northern Greenland caught the world's attention in 2010 when satellite images captured a 100-square-mile ice island breaking off. Just 2 years later, another one, 50 square miles, also fell away. Scientists are trying to get an idea of what will happen in the future. Brad DeYoung is a professor of oceanography at Memorial University.
What you're always looking for are the big changes, but to determine those, sometimes you have to separate out the kind of the year-to-year variability. The variability one might expect to see decade to decade, but the other is the larger scale kind of climate story.
In order to understand the rate of change, oceanographers are now studying icebergs in more detail, because the way icebergs break up down here mimics the disintegration of the ice shelves in the Arctic.
What we want to do is to make measurements on different kinds of bergs in different situations, and also we look at a particular iceberg and ask what's happening to it. And so make repeated measurements of the same iceberg, see how its shape changes,
over time,
how it's melting.
Melting ice shelves are very bad news. Ice shelves are dense floating sheets of ice at the end of a glacier, sometimes up to 3,000 feet thick. They're vital because they act as a huge doorstop, pushing against the glaciers, slowing their flow into the ocean. Without ice shelves, the glaciers would melt more rapidly into the sea, causing a rise in global sea levels. Today, I'm in Conception Bay at the southeast corner of Newfoundland. I'm taking a closer look at icebergs that have made the 1,600-mile journey from Greenland. I want to see how they travel through these waters.
If we've got changes in the environment, such as warmer waters, different currents, different wind patterns, it's going to affect how these icebergs travel through Iceberg Alley. So the mission is to get out and actually climb onto one of these icebergs and place a satellite tracking beacon on it.
I'll then be able to track it over the next few days.
Cotton! Iceberg! Dead ahead! The cold and the beautiful.
Without any warning, these bergs can flip, roll over, or break apart. This will be a climb unlike any I've tried before.
Holy crap.
I want to get up on the berg and place a beacon on it to track its movement and melt rate. But it's not going to be easy.
Holy crap.
What do you think of that, George? Still want to climb a berg?
Not that one. That's scary. What was once this towering berg is now this pile of thousands of pieces. Get this effervescent sound, all these bubbles, air bubbles coming up out of the ice that's degassing. Wow. With zero warning. Really drives home how dangerous these things can be when you're up close to them.
A bit shaken, we move to one that looks promising to climb.
That is a beautiful, beautiful iceberg.
We'll do a circumnavigation. If this iceberg were to roll that way, this piece of ice would come up underneath us. Okay, Rick.
Hey. I'm going to place the tracking beacon as high as possible, as I want to see how long this berg stays intact and how far it goes.
Okay.
Information like this helps scientists understand the breakup of icebergs.
The ice it's a little softer than I was expecting because it's all melting. All right, continuing up. There's water spray coming up, pressurized up over here. Bird feathers up here. Oh, the angle on this is perfect. It's nice and gentle. What a view. I want to go a little bit further over. I don't dare go any higher up. Too dangerous right here where I'm standing. Here's a good spot right here. All right, just putting an ice screw in right now. Whew. The wind's really picking up here.
I'm securing the beacon and tying it off with rope so it can be retrieved later.
Okay, the rope is in the water. The tracking beacon is retrievable. I'm gonna start working my way back.
This thing has traveled probably several years down from the Greenland glacier.
Now, let's see where it goes from here. Tracking icebergs is one way to study climate change, but I want to explore other methods that'll take me into dangerous waters. Icebergs offer valuable clues about the melting Arctic ice that spawned them. And it's not just the increase in their numbers that's concerning scientists.
It's a coupled system. You can't really look at one part of the thing without looking at all the other parts that are interconnected, because they all operate with each other in a very sophisticated harmony.
Scientists are noticing that sea ice, the frozen seawater, is also melting fast and raising the temperature of the water around it.
When you think about the sea ice, we're thinking right now we're going to have a seasonally ice-free Arctic. That stuff that's left at the end of the summer will actually shrink and disappear, you know, somewhere between 2030 and 2050.
Disappear completely?
Disappear completely in summer.
That's scary.
The sea ice keeps the oceans cool because when the surface is covered in ice, it's white, so the energy from the sun is reflected back into space, keeping the Arctic cold. But when the ice melts, the heat from the sun is absorbed into the sea, causing it to warm. And when water heats up, it expands, raising sea levels. But that's not the only problem. Melting sea ice and glaciers also change the ocean's currents. In the oceans, we have what's called the thermohaline circulation, the movement of warm water from the equator northward. All that sea and glacier ice melting and mixing together is disrupting those currents.
The amount of fresh water that are coming from these things is going to change the circulation patterns of the ocean, because the fresh water is very buoyant, and so it tends to come to the surface and the salt water underneath it, which then affects the currents.
Scientists predict that 210,000 square miles of polar ice a decade will melt into the ocean. Changing currents will affect world weather patterns, causing more ferocious storms and extreme snowfalls. The next morning, I head back to Conception Bay. My mission today is to explore the underwater part of these bergs. The base of an iceberg is rarely ever seen, but how it deteriorates in warming water helps scientists understand future melt rates in the Arctic.
We hear the phrase tip of the iceberg all the time, meaning that there's a lot more hidden underneath.
90% of an iceberg is underwater. For the largest bergs, that can be as big as a 5-story building.
If all goes well today, I'm going to get to show you what it's like below the surface. A tricky dive, lots of variables, very cold water. So this should be really interesting.
Dive master John Olivero is an experienced iceberg diver.
There is going to be a little bit of cracking and popping. If you're concerned of any of the noises, just start swimming away. If you see anything coming down at you, away and down.
Away and down. Yeah, it's only dangerous if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Here we go.
There's a couple of icebergs out in the bay right now, so we're going to try and find the best one to go diving on, get in the water, and actually see these things from underneath. It can be hard for scientists to study these giant moving blocks of ice as they're so unpredictable. We need to find one that looks stable enough to dive near.
George, I like this one because if it breaks, gravity is going to take it that way. So you guys got lots of chance to swim away.
With the berg chosen, we get suited up. Johnny drops a safety buoy, but right away, there's trouble.
Wow. Move away from the berg. Okay.
We reposition further out, and I hit the water. This berg is massive, at least 100 feet deep. It's an incredible sight. The scars of erosion can be seen everywhere, including these cracks and pockmarks all over. Wind, waves, and warm sea temperatures melt away the icebergs, slowly breaking them up. In examining the rate of decline, scientists are also looking at whether or not ocean water changes the way the iceberg melts.
The deep icebergs, if they're melting at the bottom, then there's a plume of fresh water that's coming up. And so we want to look at whether the interaction of that with the ocean water changes the way the iceberg itself melts. So is the iceberg kind of influencing its own environment in a way that changes how the melting takes place?
If scientists can understand these processes, they can make more accurate predictions for the future of the ice cap. It's a real challenge diving in these conditions. Something's gone wrong, and there's much more at stake now than just our research. I'm diving under an iceberg, getting images of its erosion. But I'm having some serious trouble.
Get him out! Get him out! Look at him! I'm very close to being seasick. Yeah.
I have to call the dive off. The conditions were really difficult down there.
Despite all the struggles I was having underwater, it was still a sight to behold. Seeing this massive berg underwater. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. So I still got a lot of fight in me, but not so much more today.
After a night of rest, I join a crew on a ship looking for icebergs. But it's not for science. These 10,000-year-old ice blocks happen to contain some of the purest fresh water in the world. And the demand for it is growing.
It is very early in the morning, up at 3:30, meeting up with the iceberg cowboy, Ed Keane.
What we're going to do, he's going to push her around, right? Then you guys just whack it out and he'll go around him, right? Just take our time. We're not in no big hurry. We are, but we got to take our time.
He's an iceberg wrangler who sells iceberg water.
The water is very pure because it's ancient, tens of thousands of years old, and there's a market for it.
The crew heads out to capture a bird.
We lasso it. We take a rope in the speedboat around and tie it off, and then we use a winch to pull us tight to the iceberg.
Nobody owns the icebergs, so it's legal to catch them and break them up before they would naturally melt. But it's a dangerous job.
Yeah, you got to treat them with respect. Some big icebergs with pinnacles and overhangs on them, and it's just too dangerous.
Big barge like this is really difficult to maneuver, so they use the small boat to give it a bit of a nudge to get it perfectly positioned to get the machinery in there to get the ice. We needed to get the barge away from this shelf that's underwater.
If this iceberg flips right now, it'll take the barge, the motorboat, and all of us along with it. These guys have learned that lesson the hard way.
Last year we had one roll on us. It was pretty bad.
Iceberg ice has been compressed for thousands of years, so it's incredibly dense. Ed positions the cranes so the excavator can take the first bites. Iceberg ice has been locked in ancient glaciers, which formed before the industrial age, making it free of contaminants.
So right now he's dropping the ice directly into those front tanks. And then they use the grinder if they want to send it to the tanks at the back, but then shift the weight.
We force water, iceberg water from the tank in, and it flows down into the other tanks.
And how many liters of water will you gather in one season?
We're looking at probably 1.2 million or 3 this year.
These guys have been at it for about 4 or 5 hours now, and then they've put a serious dent in that chunk of ice.
By late afternoon, they wrap it up and head back to shore with their haul. It's been an adventurous week for me in Iceberg Alley. Before I head home, there's one more place I need to go. I'm going to check on the status of that iceberg I was tracking.
So it's been about 3 days since I put the transmitter on the iceberg up here at Bay de Verde, and an interesting thing has happened. We've had strong winds from the north, which, as you might expect, has pushed that iceberg to the south about halfway into Conception Bay. And last night, it stopped transmitting. The iceberg has probably broken up, and the transmitter is sitting at the bottom of the bay.
It traveled almost 15 miles in 3 days.
It really does go to show how much these things move around out here.
As icebergs continue to flow into these waters off Newfoundland, they're a mixed blessing. They offer scientists a chance to further understand the process of Arctic melting, but they're also an unmistakable warning about the dramatic decline of our ice sheets. Continuing the detailed research and sharing it worldwide will enhance our ability to combat climate change. Keeping the planet cool by just 1 to 2 degrees would help preserve this frozen world.
It's going to cost us a lot more not to do something about this problem than it is for us to do something about this problem, so let's keep our habitat so that it works for us as a species.
Scientists have spoken. Now it's time for governments and individuals to take action. Weather is nothing new to Bangladesh. Seasonal rains and tropical storms hit its low-lying coast and flooded many waterways annually. But as temperatures rise worldwide, our weather is becoming more volatile, and nowhere is that felt harder than Bangladesh. A country being battered so fiercely by the effects of climate change that their existence is under threat right now. Bangladesh has been forced to take extreme measures to survive its battle against climate change. But will it be enough? I've traveled halfway around the world, this time to Bangladesh. I'm on the southern tip of Bola Island, where the land ends and the Bay of Bengal begins. Of course, I'm traveling in the monsoon, the heaviest part of the rainy season.
The sky has opened up, and it is coming down in buckets.
About 80% of Bangladesh's yearly rainfall occurs during monsoon season, which lasts from June to October. By the end, almost 1/3 of the country is underwater. And now, climate change is making the rains more unpredictable and intense.
Raining pretty hard, isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
I'm joined by translator and guide Riazul.
I'm totally ready to cope with the rain.
Bangladesh receives 80 inches of rain per year, making it one of the wettest places on Earth.
Bangladesh is a country that has been shaped by water. The entire country is basically a river delta.
It's crisscrossed by 700 rivers and innumerable streams and tributaries. Meltwaters from the mountain ranges in the north flow into the lowlands below, where they reach the largest bay in the world, the Bay of Bengal. 80% of the country is low-lying, with much of the coastal region just over 3 feet above sea level. The land is made up of silt, a soft mixture of sand and sediment, making it prone to flooding and erosion.
Whoa, very difficult to walk in. This fine silt has been deposited here. Some of it local, some of it will have even come all the way from the glaciated areas of the Himalayas, thousands of miles to the north.
As a result, the land here is very fertile, but also very fragile. As climate change takes hold, more water is flowing down from the mountaintops. Riverbanks are swelling, making tides more dangerous, all of which are hitting the shores of Bangladesh hard.
We're losing a lot of the land to the water. Bangladesh is a country that might very well be disappearing right in front of our eyes.
The effects of erosion can be seen everywhere.
But you can see almost a sharp knife edge where the riverbank has just been slowly carved away. Every high tide, a little more goes out. Every storm, a little more goes out. It's eroded back right to the edge of the road.
Chacha, apnar naam ki chacha? Mohammad Akbar Ali Sana. Mohammad. His name is Mohammad Akbar Ali Sana. He has been living here for 19 years.
19 years.
When he settled here first time, His house was 20 feet from here.
That's where the house used to be.
Yeah, 20 feet that way.
And it just keeps having to move it back?
এবং এটা ভাঙতে ভাঙতে yeah, it's moving back towards the road.
A large population and lack of space means thousands of people are forced to live in these exposed places. Alamgir Hussain is a climate change specialist from the UN Bangladesh Development Program.
We have 19 coastal districts, and roughly 60 million people lives here. A recent study shows that, if the sea level rises by 80 centimeters, and if there is no action, then at least Bangladesh will lose around 17% of its landmass. If I only consider the coastal part of Bangladesh, then roughly around 80% of the coastal arable land will be gone.
With seas predicted to rise between 30 to 80 inches by the end of the century, it's a very real threat. Already, the sea is encroaching, and you can see how the locals are desperately trying to hold back the water.
Is they put up these wooden protection barriers along the riverbank, and it's basically a last-ditch, desperate attempt to keep what remaining land they have from falling into the river. It seems to be working for now, but I don't think it's going to hold for too many more years.
As sea levels continue to rise, protecting the coast and its communities is key to this country's survival. And nowhere is this more important than the Sundarbans region, which has the largest mangrove forest in the world. I'm heading west to see Bangladesh's best natural protection against sea level rise and storm surges. The Sundarbans covers 4,000 square miles. 60% is in Bangladesh and 40% in India. It's home to over 500 species of animals, including the endangered Bengal tiger.
All morning I've been seeing different fishermen set up with their boats in the middle of the river.
The area is rich in natural resources like fish, providing a livelihood for the 3 million people who live in the surrounding communities. We head deep into the jungle.
We've taken the boat out early, 5:30 this morning, gone upstream a bit, and now we're just letting the current take us downstream very quietly. There's this strange glowing orb in the sky that I haven't seen in many, many days. The sun has actually decided to make an appearance.
This vast forest provides an important natural protection to the coast of Bangladesh. Mangrove trees can grow in salt water and low oxygen soil. Their dense root system helps stabilize the coastline and reduces erosion and damage from waves and storms. But now, increased erosion throughout the region is causing unsustainable amounts of sediment and silt to enter the waterways that flow through the forest. And the protective mangrove trees are suffocating. Dr. Khan tells me why.
These creeks are like blood vessels. And the problem is because of the continuous siltation, these creeks are silted out. And once the creeks are silted, all the mangrove roots are blocked. And these are the breathing organs for mangrove plants. Roots are blocked, they cannot breathe, so they die.
200 years ago, the Sundarbans measured about 6,400 square miles. Now, it's down to a third of its original size. Of course, this loss of habitat is having a big impact on the animals that live here. The tiger population has drastically shrunk by 40% in only 10 years.
So there are actually a lot fewer tigers than was originally thought. That's not a very big population, between 100 and 200 individuals.
No, it's not a big population. If the tiger is gone, there will be too many deer, and they will graze all the seedlings. That's why there will be no regeneration. That will be a catastrophic event. That will be from the apex to the bottom.
Saving the mangrove forest and the creatures that live in it is essential because without it, a huge chunk of the Bangladesh coast will be rapidly swallowed by the sea. Hundreds of animal species won't survive and millions of people will be displaced. But erosion and rising sea levels are not the only climate-related issue threatening Bangladesh. The monster cyclones that blow through every year bring a whole other level of destruction. Bangladesh is a country battered by fierce weather that sweeps in across the Bay of Bengal. Cyclone season lasts from August to November, bringing massive storms. But now, as climate change takes hold, they're getting more fierce and unpredictable.
Cyclones are what we would call hurricanes. The people that live here are about as vulnerable to these massive cyclones as anyone in the world. It's hard to imagine a population of people more exposed to the elements.
Cyclones are a product of heat and moisture. They form in the warm Indian Ocean just before and after monsoon season. As climate change warms the sea, cyclones and tropical storms get worse. The damage from past storms can be seen everywhere as I travel to meet those affected by the extreme weather here.
And the spot I'm visiting today is Charfesong Orphanage.
70 boys make this place their home. Shirajul Islam is the director of the orphanage.
What were the circumstances that caused the orphanage to be formed in the first place?
The orphanage is established after cyclone 1970. More than 300,000 people died in this area.
The 1970 Ebola cyclone was the deadliest tropical storm in history, with a storm surge of up to 30 feet. And since then, globally, the number of cyclones has tripled. Here in Bangladesh, hundreds of people are killed each year by storms.
Most of the students have lost their father in the Bay of Bengal.
So most of their fathers were fishermen?
Yeah, fishermen.
The country has been hit by 10 cyclones in 16 years. The last one was in 2007, when Cyclone Sidir tore through the south, devastating communities. It also coincided with some of the worst monsoon flooding the country had seen.
What would you do with the orphans, with the boys, if a cyclone was coming 2 days from now?
We have one building. Our boys can take shelter in there.
There are cyclone shelters all over the country now, and they've drastically reduced deaths from storms. In spite of the hardship they've faced, the future for these kids is optimistic.
Our boys are doing good results, so they are doing hard work. And our boys are is loving the orphanage. They can play.
So they have a good place to stay, they make friends, they get educated to better themselves, that they can now get good jobs.
Every year, the seasons bring tremendous change to the landscape here. And as we move forward, those changes are going to become more and more drastic as climate change continues to creep on and have its effect here in Bangladesh.
One place where these changes are incredibly apparent is the village of Kukrimukri, where a project is underway to save homes and livelihoods from the damage caused by climate change. Here, storm surges regularly wash away houses, flood farmlands, and render crops useless because of saltwater intrusion.
When salinity intrudes, the agricultural production of Bangladesh significantly will impact. One other major challenge associated with salinity intrusion is right now with availability of fresh water and fresh water for drinking. Bangladesh is called a land of rivers. Water is everywhere, but right now in Bangladesh, still around 20 million people in the coastal belt is suffering from crisis of drinking water.
Alamgir takes me around the village to see what they're doing about it.
So is this the embankment here?
Yeah, this is the embankment here. It's around 14 kilometers long. The sea is on that side.
In order to protect themselves, a thick embankment made from mud has been built all around the community with the help of the UN.
So I could follow this embankment now all the way around the perimeter of the island for 14 kilometers?
All these 14 kilometers you can, yes.
Impressive.
Just 2 years back, nothing was here.
It provides a wall of protection from saltwater intrusion and storm surges 10 feet high. Ponds have been dug to collect the rainwater during the monsoon.
Yeah. So this acts as a freshwater reserve. This water can be, purified through, there are very simple techniques.
This land normally would not have been very useful, but now there are fish in the pond and there's vegetable gardens all the way ringing around.
There are 10 similar projects across the south. But for many along the coast, the flooding can't be stopped and they're forced to flee. Thousands of displaced Bangladeshis head to Dhaka every year, and the mass influx is creating an entirely new crisis. Dhaka, the crowded capital of Bangladesh, where according to the NGO Coastal Watch, every hour another 11 Bangladeshis arrive after losing their homes to rising seas. It's a global problem. Experts predict that by 2050, 250 million people worldwide will be forced to move due to the effects of climate change. 10% will be in Bangladesh.
There are some studies going on really to find out climate-induced migration. They can't really afford to have a sustainable livelihood, so they're moving out.
The population of Dhaka is exploding. There are 14 million people crowded into 180 square miles, making it one of the most densely populated cities in the world. The city's infrastructure can't keep up. We hail a rickshaw to go and see how the people hardest hit by climate change live. With so many people in Dhaka, jobs are scarce, and many earn just $2 a day pulling rickshaws.
For the low-income people, they can pull the rickshaw and they can make some money here.
Many of them live in the poor neighborhoods, like the one I'm being taken to.
This part of Dhaka is known as the Bola slum, and it's named after the island of Bola, where most of these people who live here have relocated from.
It was originally built for people left homeless by the devastating 1970 cyclone. But now, it also houses people who have simply lost their land from the encroaching sea.
This place is totally a labyrinth.
It's the definition of hardship. There's only one electricity supply and very little clean running water. This is what life is like for 3 million people living in Dhaka.
It's kind of heartbreaking to see because so many families live in just such terrible, poor conditions here. A lot of these people don't have a lot of choice but to come to places like this.
Even though Dhaka isn't on the coast, it's surrounded by water and extremely vulnerable to the effects of monsoon rains. And the more that falls, the harder life becomes. I find my way to the home of the Kasham family, who fled Bola 16 years ago. Now, they live next to the city's drainage canal, which regularly overflows in the rain.
This is the wall of Dhaka water sanitary system.
Okay.
Here, there's the pumping system, end of this canal. In Khalesheshi, they have the pumping system. So this area almost go underwater every year.
Here or on the other side of the wall?
Other side, and then come inside. Water level goes up to that mark. You see it, George?
Wow.
They were flooded, and this area was submerged around for 11 days maximum, once.
Even in here, people can't escape the ravages of climate change. If monsoon rains become as intense as predicted, Dhaka won't be a safe refuge for long. I leave, and as I head to the port of Dhaka, my journey is slowed down, not by the weather, but by celebration. Bangladesh has the 4th largest Muslim population in the world and is also the 3rd largest Hindu state. Monsoon season coincides with important festivals for both faiths.
It's the end of Ramadan here, and you can hear the prayer call in the background. This city is bustling right now.
Eid Mubarak! Eid Mubarak!
And in the Hindu neighborhood, they're celebrating the Rath Yatra festival.
It is one of the biggest festivals in the Hindu calendar.
And boy, do the Bangladeshis know how to celebrate.
These thousands of people, we've all come together, and we're pulling the chariot through the streets.
The festival is an ode to Jagannath, or Juggernaut, which means unstoppable force. Not unlike the monsoon.
It looks like the Juggernaut, the unstoppable force, is about to meet the other unstoppable force.
The monsoon.
But the revelers don't let that stop them.
Just trying to hold up. Hooked on a wire. The wire's really dry. I hope that's not high voltage.
Once unhooked, the chariot temple is pulled to its final destination.
This is as far as the chariot is going to come. It's going to sit here for a week.
The Jagannath statues are carried through the crowd of devotees to the local temple.
That was a world-class, grade A sensory overload. An honor to have been here. Just loved it. And we got some monsoon rain.
As the heavens open, it's clear to me that the Bangladeshi people are used to persevering in the face of extreme weather. With that in mind, I head north.
Resilience and adaptability are two terms that I would definitely use to describe the people that live here.
I'm discovering as the flooding here gets worse, Bangladeshis are finding increasingly more innovative ways of adapting. I've traveled to the north, to Pabna, to visit an inspirational education program.
So what do you do if you live in a remote, rural part of the country that floods regularly? You've got kids, you need to send them to school. Well, you improvise and innovate.
Here, they've come up with the idea of floating schools. In 1998, the first floating school was founded to help the children who were missing out on vital education as schools were frequently flooded. I meet the program's manager, Suprakash Paul.
শুধুই স্বনির্ভর সংস্থা চিন্তা করলো যদি স্কুলটাই ছাত্রদের বাড়ির দোরগোড়ায় পৌঁছাতে পারে।
They started with one boat, but now have a fleet of 39. There are 22 school boats, 10 library boats, and 7 adult education centers.
Here in the library boat, we've got all kinds of books for all different ages. We've even got a couple of computers up the front run by solar power, so it can be operating pretty much anywhere. It's a pretty cool setup.
70,000 kids have benefited from this project. But it's not just classrooms that are floating. Many farms have also been erected above the water.
We've got a garden with vegetables. We've got ducks that they keep here for, of course, their eggs and for meat.
Being self-sufficient is vital for survival.
In each of these ponds, there's fish that they're growing.
এভাবে পুরো পরিবারকে আমরা আমাদের প্রোগ্রামের আওতায় আনার চেষ্টা করছি এবং এখান থেকে অনেক যারা ট্রেনিং পাচ্ছে ট্রেনিং পেয়ে অনেক।
What's clear to me is that the people of Bangladesh have a remarkable character when confronted by extreme weather.
From building schools out on the water to finding new ways to grow crops in an ever-increasing environment of unpredictability.
As our climate continues to change and the weather becomes more severe, Bangladesh is a country to watch. It's facing the most extreme repercussions of climate change, from severe flooding and erosion to mass displacement. Things we could see across the globe if immediate action is not taken to combat climate change. Polar bear, the world's largest land predator, is under threat. As the Arctic warms, the icy habitat of the bear is melting faster, leaving them hungry and vulnerable. Their population is dwindling as they struggle to survive the longer summers. And now, starving bears are coming into towns searching for food. I've come to their world to find out how they're coping in a fast-changing climate. Can they survive and adapt, or will the mighty polar bear become a climate casualty? I'm heading to Canada's far north, to the timberline, where trees give way to Arctic tundra, and the view of the northern lights is at its most spectacular. I'm landing in Churchill, Manitoba, the polar bear capital of the world. It's summertime here, and Arctic fox and snow geese can be seen in the rugged wilderness that's all around. Right off the coast, hundreds of beluga whales are gathering to feed and give birth to their young.
I'm surrounded by beluga whales here. Wow, very, very close to the kayak. Belugas and polar bears share the same habitat. This is Hudson Bay. For half the year, it's the ice-covered hunting ground of the polar bear. The polar bear, of course, is the Ursus maritimus, the marine bear, and they're very comfortable in the water.
But this time of year, they're pretty much land-bound, wandering the coastline in a state of semi-hibernation. They forage for what little food they can find while they wait for Hudson Bay to freeze over in the winter. Then they can return to their preferred habitat, the sea ice, and start hunting for seals again. But temperatures are rising worldwide, so their habitat is changing, which puts their future at risk.
The Arctic regions are warming at twice the rate of the global average. Some scientists say that we could be losing 4% of our sea ice every 10 years. That could have a devastating effect on the polar bear populations.
There are an estimated 25,000 polar bears in the world, and they depend on sea ice for survival.
They're the most majestic animal in the Arctic, and they've evolved over a long period of time from grizzly bears to take advantage of the special and unique habitat of sea ice.
It's a rich hunting ground for the bears.
They almost exclusively hunt ring seals on sea ice in the winter. That's their primary source of energy. And so the sea ice becomes a very important part of the habitat of the polar bear.
But now, with warmer air temperatures, the ice has been thawing earlier and freezing later in the waters around Hudson Bay. Less ice for less time means the bears are trapped on land for longer without access to the high-fat food they need. I want to find out more about how bears survive during these increasingly long summer months, so I'm joining up with Matthias Breiter, a biologist and expert in polar bear behavior. We've come 250 miles south to a favorite resting spot for southern polar bears. Matthias has been working with the polar bears here for 20 years and will try to get me as close as is safely possible to observe the bears without stressing them.
All right, for our bear excursions, we've got this crazy machine. 8-wheel drive, will go anywhere, over anything. You'll notice there is no sides. There's no protection, really.
A bear standing up is 10, 11 feet. He's somewhere up there.
Yeah.
Perfect chewing height.
Perfect chewing height.
We head out. The bears that are in this area are part of the western Hudson Bay population, made up of about 1,000 bears. Their habitat covers around 1,000 square miles. It's not long before a bear comes into view.
We've spotted a bear. It's over by the river. It's moving this way, so we're gonna go out ahead of the bear, turn off the vehicles, get out on the ground. Hopefully, the bear will come to us.
So how far will they go inland?
Juvenile males, 300 kilometers easily. Males, when they reach sexual maturity, they look for new places. When you're young, you test a lot of things, and mostly you screw up. But occasionally you get lucky.
That sounds like my teenage years.
Now, one of your specialties is getting up close to bears in the wild on foot. Some people think you're crazy. They are the largest land carnivore on Earth.
The thing is that people generally are interpreting curiosity as aggression. And then if you behave wrong, you can actually turn a purely curious approach into a very dangerous encounter.
With the bear in sight, we make our way towards it on foot.
It's on the move.
We need to play it
many,
safe
many
for our
years.
sake. But also, we don't want to disturb the bear.
Matthias, do you think it's male or female?
I think it's a male, probably 800-pound bear.
As well as observing them, I want to see what the bears are feeding on during these extended warmer months to get a sense of how the loss of sea ice is affecting their health.
Polar bears spend about 4 months living on land. So while they're here, we want to see what types of food they're ingesting. And the best way is to A, observe them eating, but B, examine their scat. And we can actually see what kind of nutrients they're getting, what food they're eating.
I'll be taking my samples to the lab at the Winnipeg Zoo for further analysis.
As we collect more and more scat, we'll have a better sense what bears have been eating. So what are they eating in the summer? There's been lots of talk about kind of switching to alternative and terrestrial food sources. So how big a role does that play? What's going into those scats? What's supporting those different bears?
We know they eat grass in the summer, but with the warm months getting longer and longer, will this diet be enough for them to survive on? Gathering samples will help us find out.
Right now, the bear is just curious, sitting on the sand.
Now he's gonna poop.
It's pooping. Fresh bear poop, yes. Of course, we have to get to it. Doesn't seem to be too interested in us, so we're gonna try and get up close to where we saw it drop that scat, so.
Isn't that nice poop there?
And the bear decided to stop. The bear is quite close, but as long as we don't do anything to alarm him, he should be okay. Just in case, I've got my bear banger here. Shoots off a flare. Hopefully, won't need it.
This bear is too close for us to safely collect the sample right now, and it looks like it's got no plans on leaving anytime soon.
There's no reason to run off. Running off takes a lot of energy. You don't want to stress them. They don't have energy to waste at this time of the year.
We decide to wait it out.
So the whole life of a polar bear is totally retention of energy.
What's the lean times for them right now?
They're very lean time.
They need to conserve their energy because, for the most part, they're living off their own fat reserves stored up from last season's hunt.
Should I be worried that I have a seal blubber energy bar in my pocket right now?
Well, I'm 100% convinced you have any seal blubber, anything, this bear would be run over here.
It's like ringing the dinner bell.
As their fat reserves run low, the question now becomes, can the Hudson Bay polar bear adapt to survive? These scat samples will provide invaluable information, but this bear isn't making it easy.
He's just hanging out. One thing I can do is mark this location on my GPS, and we could always come back and grab the sample. Sometimes we have limited options. So I'll just give this point a name, location. Okay, bear poop 01.
We move on to look for more bears. We spot two near the vehicles.
They both look very big, healthy.
They look healthy.
It's early in the season, so they would have just come off the ice not that long ago, so they probably still have a belly full of...
They have probably been feeding reasonably well until about a month ago. Now they lose 2 pounds a day in weight. We can try to get ahead, but if he keeps on following her, they'll just...
Yeah, I think they're gone.
We go east.
Slow down, slow down.
Look at those claw marks. That's so big. They cannot retract their claws.
No, they cannot.
They're permanent. They're always out. Very cool. Let's follow them.
All right.
We follow the tracks and are led to a big male polar bear.
Oh, here he goes.
There he gets
He's getting up.
But this encounter soon gets a little too close for comfort.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Dad.
I'm in northern Canada, in polar bear country. I need to collect scat samples to gauge the impact of climate change on the bear's diet. But if I disturb this one, I could be in trouble.
Matthias, do you think it's male or female?
A large male in its prime.
We watch the bear as it rests for more than an hour.
He seems a little more active now than he was a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
That's 3 yawns now.
Can be slightly nervous yawn. That can mean that he is going to get up and approach us a bit.
So what do we do if he does get up and start approaching us?
We'll do a few steps towards him. If we back up, he'll just come faster.
Right. Polar bears can run up to about 40 kilometers per hour, but only in short bursts. So if that bear really wanted to run, it could be here in the blink of an eye.
I want him to relax back down. And there he gets up.
He's getting up.
This 900-pound bear is a ferocious predator. It's nerve-wracking being this close.
A little bit of displacement behavior.
So he's just chewing on the grass right now.
It's like if there's something you want to do, but you don't really dare. And so you jump to another behavior.
He was just sort of thinking about us.
He's hesitating. You don't want to create fear. Fear can result in aggression.
Now he's lying back down. So if I were to suddenly start running away from him,
in all likelihood, he'll run after you.
You think so, huh?
95%.
Really? Oh, here he goes.
Okay. If he gets off the grass, we have to make a step towards him.
Walking towards a polar bear goes against every instinct.
Come on. No.
If we're wrong, we could be killed.
He'll try to come again.
So just look big,
Yeah, when he tries to hook in, I make a little step towards him. You kind of want to keep the pressure a little bit on him. Now he tries to hook again a little bit, I put a little pressure on him.
That's amazing.
You want to be dominant. Any kind of movement towards another bear is always dominance behavior. I'm steering him away. And now he's made up his mind.
He's gone.
He's gone, without creating stress.
My heart was racing. You've done this hundreds of times before, but I've never actively moved towards a polar bear that is coming towards me.
And the male one.
A big male, yeah.
I mean, if you understand a little bit how bears interact with other bears, they're reasonably predictable. People just do not read their language right.
With that crisis averted, we go back to collect the first scat sample. It's not just the bears of Hudson Bay that are seeing deteriorating ice conditions. It's a problem all over the Arctic. The minimum sea ice recorded in 2015 was 1.7 million square miles, about 40% less than the previous 30-year average.
The global temperature that we've seen of the planet, the rise of global temperature, is about 0.7 degrees Celsius. In the Arctic, it's about 2.5 to 3 times that. And the reason for that is when you cover that surface with this white sea ice, you're reflecting all that energy from the sun back to space, so it keeps it cool. Open it up, that energy goes into the surface of the ocean and it warms things up. That's a big change.
The loss of sea ice would cause a major break in the chain of life in the Arctic. Sea ice is an integral part of the Arctic food web, providing habitat for microorganisms like ice algae and zooplankton. Algae attaches to the bottom of the ice and becomes food for fish and marine mammals. Those fish sustain seals, and seals sustain polar bears. Polar bears are at the top of the food chain, but scientists are predicting that the Hudson Bay population could disappear by 2050. For now, I have the opportunity to observe them up close.
It's the one spot in the world where you can see polar bears in the wild, not on the ice, so it's a really unique spot.
The bear we tracked this morning moves further down, so we can safely collect the sample.
Here's the scat.
Was able to get the sample and out of there perfectly safely without disturbing the bear, really. Specimen bag?
Until we get it to the zoo lab.
Perfect. What we find in these samples could provide vital clues to help determine the bear's chance of survival. But getting this close to the bears is dangerous work.
So she's coming right towards us?
The polar bear has been broken down into 19 different regions that scientists recognize. And of those 19, 10 of them are here in Canada. So it's an excellent place to study polar bears and how climate change is affecting their population.
And it's the bears here in western Hudson Bay that are the most at risk of extinction. Their southerly location means they're bearing the brunt of the effects of climate change. Their numbers have declined by 22% since the early 1980s.
Over the last 30 years, the amount of time that open water season is in Hudson Bay is now about 4 weeks longer than it used to be. And there was some very dramatic observations of bears in very critical condition because they've had to fast for so long. They're not getting enough energy, and so that creates problems with mortality.
In a few weeks' time, temperatures will drop and the ice will start to form on the bay. Hundreds of hungry bears will converge along the shores close to the town of Churchill in anticipation of the coming ice. And for Churchill's Polar Bear Alert program, that's a problem.
So the longer it takes for the ice to form on the bay, the busier we are. Oftentimes you'll drive along this road and there will be a bear just right there.
Brett Willock is taking me on one of his bear patrols. He's covering a 3-mile perimeter around Churchill, making sure hungry bears don't make it into town.
The one last night, it was about 5:30 in the morning where our staff was called and they chased it away.
Hundreds of bears gather on the coast, but it's usually the more desperate bears and juveniles that come into town to scavenge for food, bringing them dangerously close to people.
When was the last time that someone was actually attacked by a bear and injured?
2 years ago.
It can be a terrifying experience. Locals carry arms and avoid walking alone at night. In the most recent attack, 2 people were severely injured by a polar bear in the early hours of the morning.
And when you're built right on the coast of Hudson Bay, it happened.
Most bears are coaxed away before they make it into town, but some become problem bears, and Brett and his team have to trap and relocate them. He shows me one of his traps.
Right now, we're only using the one.
And how many bears do you trap per year, approximately?
It depends on how many bears are around.
Yeah.
It could be 30 bears, it could be 70 bears.
Trapped bears are taken to the holding facility, weighed, tagged, and then relocated. Many are malnourished. Locating high-energy food is key to the survival of the polar bear. The lack of sea ice is forcing some bears to migrate north to colder regions with better ice conditions. Recent DNA evidence found genes of the southern bear in the high Arctic.
We can probably expect to see either loss or much lower numbers of polar bears in places like Manitoba, and then maybe higher densities of polar bears in Grise Fiord or places that are really in the high Arctic.
But if polar bears can find new food sources, there may be hope for the population here. We head back out along the coast to see more bears and collect more samples. Not far down the beach, we encounter a sow and her cub.
The mother and cub keep wandering sort of west along the coastline. They're
Warmer
watching us
weather
the
for
whole
Hudson
time.
Bay has another catastrophic impact on females and their cubs. Increased spring rains can collapse their maternity dens, reproduction rates are down, and cub mortality is up for the Hudson Bay bears.
So you can see the sniffing.
Yeah.
Now she's coming right into the scent, coming right towards us. She'll never come all the way up.
No.
Their priority is to keep the cub safe. Bears are opportunists, so curiosity is exceedingly important when finding new food sources. So that is just their nature. They're curious. Always keep a look around. You never know. There could be a bear lying anywhere in the bushes and catching our scent.
And you'd never see it until, you know.
It's as far as she wanted to come.
While we observe them walking the tide line, we get lucky.
They're both pooping?
Both of them pooped simultaneously. It was like a synchronized pooping.
We wait till it's safe to go in and get the sample.
Really fresh. I'll just mark this. Awesome.
On our way back, we see a polar bear finishing off what looks like the remains of a snow goose. We know that a handful of polar bears have been spotted hunting and catching caribou and eating berries as black bears do. But are they making a real transition to more land-based foods, or are these just opportunistic meals? Our next step will provide the answers. We're heading to Winnipeg to have the scat analyzed and find out if the Hudson Bay polar bears can be adapting to a swiftly warming climate. With scat samples in hand, we arrive at the lab at the zoo in Winnipeg to find out if the Hudson Bay polar bear population has a future.
Let's take a look at this.
We got a bunch.
We pull out all the samples for Dr.
Yes,
Peterson
this is
and
the
log
male.
them.
Female.
We'll just have to make sure that we switch gloves between samples, just in case we're going to use these for genetic analysis.
He loads the first sample into the microscope.
There's been lots of discussion about summer food sources, bird species and stuff, so I'm always curious to see if something like that shows up.
Goose
as well.
eggs.
Yeah.
He analyzes and compares each sample.
Yeah, pretty consistent. I don't know. It looks much the same as the other ones.
The grass, I don't see anything else in there. It's salad, which is totally not what you think of when you think of a bear.
Every sample we analyzed was composed of a grass called sedges. The grass gives them liquid, but no nutrients. The longer they eat grass, the more their body condition deteriorates.
So the idea that polar bears will be able to adapt to life on land without sea ice is really not practical.
No, but we're not going to see all the polar bears shift over to grazing and these other food sources in a short time period. Ultimately, polar bears need to be out on the ice getting seals, and if they're not getting to it or they're getting to it for fewer weeks or fewer months, it's going to have big, population level impact.
Without the ability to adapt to new food, the future for many polar bears is looking bleak. At the current rate of climate change, even the most northerly sea ice will melt completely in the summer, and the polar bears will have nowhere left to go. For the first time, an animal at the very top of the food chain could be wiped out by climate change. It's up to everyone, individuals, companies, and countries, to continue to reduce the causes of climate change and save the polar bear.